An article that I wrote a week or so ago, 5 Martech mistakes costing brands big. So the idea around this article, I've had a couple of client meetings over the past few weeks, and everybody that I'm speaking to is talking about how they're struggling to adopt technologies like data management platforms or customer data platforms, and that they're simply not getting the value out of those types of solutions. And at the same time I was having those conversations, Gartner came out with their CMO 2018 survey, which effectively said that investment in Martech was falling as a proportion of total media and marketing investment. It was falling quite heavily. It was falling by about 27% year on year. So you've got this dual forces working in my mind. You have the fact that I'm speaking to clients on a day-to-day basis, and they say that they're not getting the most out of the technology that they're investing in. And then you've got also one of the leading industry research agencies coming out and saying that actually there's a lack of confidence in the market. A lot of brands just simply aren't feeling like they're getting the value out of the technology that they're investing in. They feel like they're not getting the return on investment, and so investment in that category is falling, and brands are moving their money, their budget, their dollars elsewhere. So I decided to write an article looking into that trend and trying to unpack that trend a little bit, to think about some of the reasons why that could potentially be happening, and focusing mostly on ways in which we could try and solve those challenges, and particularly something that I've been interested in for a while, which is how change management within an organization can really help with new technology adoption, how it's often overlooked because people think that you're just buying into a new piece of technology and it's going to be very easy for people to use that technology, to adopt that technology, and to execute against it. Whereas actually it requires, in most cases that I've seen, a significant investment into the way in which the organization is operating, the processes, the people. And I mean, ultimately, that is all captured under the umbrella of change management. So what I think is going wrong, in short, I've got 5 different reasons. One, I think there's a failure to establish purpose when brands are bringing in new technology. I think that there is a failure to resource and to govern new technology effectively. I think that there is a failure to launch effectively. I think there's a failure to reward. And finally, I think there's a failure to systemize. So I'm going to unpack and talk about each of those individual challenges or failures in detail. So going back up, failure to establish purpose. Now, when we talk about new technology and adopting new technology, everybody quickly isolates use cases. Okay, we're going to bring a DMP into the brand and we want to establish some use cases. How are we going to use this technology? That's not wrong. I think that that's 100% what you should be doing, but it overlooks the purpose of the technology in the organization. It's a step too far when you're starting out thinking about strategic planning, when you're starting to think about what objectives you should set against this technology. And I think what we really need to do, what a brand really needs to do up front, is to establish the purpose of the technology. This is the golden circle. Why? Why are we bringing in this piece of technology? How do we think that it's going to change our business? Not just today, not just tomorrow, but over the next 9 months, 18 months, 24 months, over the next 5 years. What's the direction that we want to be taking as an organization? How is this technology going to power that direction? How is it going to drive us forward? And I think a lot of people overlook that guiding principle, that purpose, and they jump straight into the use cases. Use cases are facilitators of the purpose. So you need to lay out that vision. You need to lay out that North Star really early on. You need to understand in clear and concise terms what the purpose is, because then you can translate it and communicate it out to the wider organization. The wider organization doesn't necessarily care for the use cases, because there's going to be potentially dozens of use cases that we need to look at. What they do care about and what they can get behind, rally behind, is a purpose, is a single defined concept. And every time a use case falls flat, every time performance starts to shake, Every time the DMP or the CDP or whatever technology it is that you're working with is in question, the purpose will drive people forwards. That clearly defined purpose will drive people from one use case to the next, from a success to a failure back to a success. Looking at the second reason then, so failure to resource and to govern. I think this is, fairly self-evident. I think resource planning within our ecosystem is incredibly challenging. I think that having the right kinds of people involved in the implementation and the ongoing management of technology is hard. I think it's hard because we don't necessarily have the volume of people with the skill set, and we also don't have those people that also have project management experience and that can lead a project and that understand the business value of deploying technology and can communicate that business value back up through the chain. It's all very well and good having technology specialists working within the solutions themselves, but having somebody that can really communicate the value of the technology and can highlight the successes of the technology within the organization to drive adoption, to drive advocacy, I think is something very different. And what you tend to need is individuals that can do both. So I think it's a failure to resource, and largely I think that's an industry failure. That's something that needs to be solved and probably will be solved over time as technology and data management become far more mainstream. Also, I think that there is a failure to govern, and I think this is a much larger failure on behalf of the brand, on behalf of the agency, because this is something that you can change. You can't necessarily change the amount of people that are skilled in data management and technology management overnight, but what you can change is the way in which you govern those people and the way in which you build structures around the technology to manage people and processes. And oftentimes, when I'm working with major organizations, global brands, the structures that are put in place are incredibly convoluted and complex, and that really doesn't help. I mean, you've got a new technology platform, you've got new people, you've got a new way of working potentially, and you're trying to embed that within an organization that has a very strict, has a very bureaucratic organizational structure, and that really sometimes just kills the project because you're having to establish this new way of working, try and be innovative, try and develop new capability within a structure that simply doesn't allow for that. And so I think that when people bring this kind of capability into the organization, they need to be really cognizant of the fact that it may not gel very well with their initial or already existing processes and structures. And they need to, I think, put in place very simplistic, very narrow governance structures. And by narrow, what I mean is they don't need to have a lot of different points in the chain of command. I think that the value of the technology, the successes and the failures, the challenges that people are having in adopting and implementing need to be communicated to the key decision makers and stakeholders as quickly as possible. And we need to be able to work reactively. We need to be able to work in an agile fashion. We need to be able to change and move and change direction. If something isn't working and we need to mix it up a little bit, we need to be able to do that. And we can't be hamstrung by a process or by an organizational structure that simply doesn't allow for that kind of flexibility. So governance is really important. Number 3, failure to launch. So time to first value. Time to first value is a key concept in software as a service. As a software as a service vendor, you'll often be targeted on time to first value. And what that essentially means is how quickly can you generate some level of output out of the system, some value out of the system. It can take 2 weeks. Is it going to take 2 months? Is it going to take 2 years? Now, time to first value is so important as a SaaS vendor because you want to be able to substantiate the value that the technology is providing to the business as quickly as possible. So if you're a SaaS vendor, what you want to try and do is set up a very simple use case, and you want to try and execute that use case very quickly. And you're willing to oftentimes put a lot of investment in your own resource, your own people, to make that use case happen on behalf of a brand or on behalf of an agency. Because it's so important to be able to demonstrate a quick win, early value. This solution works, we've proved that it works, Now it's up to you to continue to progress with the solution and to iterate on the use cases that you're developing. That's the idea. Time to first value is also incredibly important from a brand's perspective or from an agency's perspective, and it's often one of those things that's overlooked. It's a vendor metric, but it should be a buyer metric. How quickly can we adopt this technology? How quickly can we get a use case up and running? How quickly can we generate advocacy within this business against the use of this technology? That is all time to first value. And it should be something that brands look at just as heavily as vendors. Because if you onboard a new piece of technology and it's 3 months or 6 months or a year before anybody sees the value of that technology, nobody's going to think that that technology is worthwhile investing their time into. In fact, it becomes almost toxic within the organization. Nobody's been able to make success of that technology. Nobody's been able to drive a use case or a business case forward using that technology. Am I going to put my hand up to try and make that technology work? I could fail. Everybody else has failed. I don't want that on my record. So we've got to try and do very early on is build use cases that are going to succeed more often than not. I wrote down in the article, in Time to First Value, a quote, a principle actually from Newton's laws of physics. His first law was that objects in motion stay in motion and objects in rest stay in rest, which mirrors the point I was making earlier. If you have a technology solution where you've built use cases, where you've deployed against use cases, where you've shown value early on, the momentum will be there. People will want to invest their time in that technology. They will want to drive use cases forward. They will want to be successful. And you will find that they will invest the time, and because they're investing the time, those things will happen, and you will get momentum. If nothing happens with that technology, as I was saying, and it sits there and nobody really uses it, you'll find the opposite will happen. If it is in rest, it will stay in rest. And building that initial momentum, I think, is probably one of the most challenging things to do. Not so challenging if you've just implemented the technology, because everybody's investing their time in implementation. Everybody's very excited about the implementation. We're bringing this new technology on board. We've spent 18 months discovering what technology we should work with, contracting, going through procurement, etc. Now we're implementing. We're implementing this technology, and it's going to be a change in direction for our organization. Everybody's invested at that point in time. You have a 3-month window post-implementation, prove out some of the value of the technology and to build momentum. And if you don't do that, then you will be in rest. And objects in rest stay in rest. It's going to be very difficult for you to then reinvest your time or other people's time in that technology in order to build the momentum from that point moving forwards. So the fourth challenge, fourth failure to reward. Now, this is something I'm quite vocal on, and oftentimes I think people maybe misrepresent what I'm talking about, or misunderstand what I'm talking about, I should say. So a failure to reward. I think that people that work on this technology, more technology, ad technology, I think command a premium in the market. I think they command a premium in the market based on supply and demand. There simply aren't enough of those people, and we need to capitalize on those people whenever we find them. So they command a premium in the market. I think that is a fair statement. They need to be incentivized effectively within the organization, not just based on salary. So reward isn't simply based on salary or bonus. It's not a purely financial reward system that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is recognition. What I'm talking about is an ability to isolate those individuals that are driving towards adoption of technology and highlight their performance within the organization to move them forwards quickly, to reward them in other ways. And I think that's important because they're risk takers oftentimes. They're working in an environment that doesn't guarantee success. They're trying to change the way in which the organization is working. They're trying to change processes. They're trying to work with people that maybe have worked in a certain way for a very long period of time, and it's really tough. And I think that those people need to be rewarded effectively, or at least have the correct incentive structures in front of them in order to establish that kind of investment. I'm not going to invest my time unless I really see the benefit for me personally. I understand the principle and the purpose behind the technology for the organization, and I want to achieve that. That's great. But I also am interested in myself, and self-interest is going to drive me towards making the investment in my time in that technology. So I think that establishing an incentive structure which really recognizes the efforts of those people that are involved in the technology, that are driving adoption of the technology, is key. It's very important. And I also think that this technology is oftentimes not inexpensive. It's very costly. And if you're going to make that kind of investment in the technology, then you need to also work with the right kind of people and get those people involved. So challenge number 5, the final challenge, failure to systemize. So this is really, I think, something that comes into play later on in adoption of technology. It's something that you need to look at probably initially in terms of the way in which you build out the principles of industrializing, systemizing the use of this technology through the organization. But it's probably something that really comes into play 3, 6, 9 months down the line, when you are starting to move from individual champions, individual use cases, through to day-to-day activation and use of a technology platform. So I think there are a few things that really are required for large-scale industrialized adoption of technology. One, I think that you need to have a very clear governance structure and a very clear delineation of roles and responsibilities. So we spoke earlier about early on governance structures, how you want to streamline those governance structures. I think when you're looking to systemize, when you're looking to adopt this technology, any technology across a large global organization, clearly it's not always going to be the case that you can have very streamlined governance structures. I think that's mostly for the early adoption of the solution. What you need to have is very clean, very clear governance structures that work across the full organogram of the organization, or generally speaking, so that everybody knows what their role and what their responsibility is, what their accountability is on that technology. The second requirement is to embed incentive schemes to cover operational tasks at all levels. So we spoke about that. I think obviously those incentive schemes, those reward schemes, shouldn't just relate to the people that are working on the technology right there and then through implementation and through early adoption. I think that's a different set of incentive schemes and structures. I think moving into ongoing management, working with this technology over 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, I think you need to establish incentive schemes and structures for the organization as a whole. Particularly if you look at deploying data management platform technology on the sell side of the business. So if you're a publisher, for instance, and you want to leverage this technology in order to support advertising sales on your owned and operated properties, it's not just good enough to incentivize the ad operations teams or the technical operations teams that will be working directly with the technology. You also want to make sure that you're incentivizing your sales teams. You want to make sure that you're incentivizing your account management teams. You want to make sure that you're incentivizing everybody that is working with that technology in order to ensure its success. Number 3, forums dedicated to sharing best practice, success, and the ongoing challenges to be overcome. So this is, typically a quarterly business review or an executive business review, a way in which we can share the common goals, the common challenges, the common successes across the organization in the use of this technology. So these things have proved to be incredibly valuable in the past. It's a way in which you can generate understanding, share information, share best practice, and also it's a way in which you can reset the bar on adoption, show people that are working with the technology very well, show people that maybe aren't working with the technology so well, and establish a maturity model, essentially, which helps you to govern adoption of the technology across different entities within the organization. Could be different markets, could be different lines of business, so that you can show, look at 6 months down the line, we want and expect to have X, Y, and Z accomplished within the use and utilization of this technology. And that's what everybody else has been able to achieve. That's what we think you should be able to achieve. So go away and go and achieve that. I think it's absolutely fair to start to benchmark performance and to start to look at how performance can be measured, monitored, and optimized over time. A patient mindset. I think a patient mindset is, is something that's going to be required when you're adopting new technology. New technology, new process, new people, new organizational structures, new reward schemes. It's complex, it's convoluted, and it's not easy. And I think that expecting success and expecting everything to go according to plan straight away is probably ill-advised. I think that you need to be patient with the technology that you're working with. I think you need to be patient with the people that are operating, and I think that you need to look at the macro as well as at the micro. I'm not saying that you don't want to focus on the individual tasks on a day-to-day basis. You do, because they move things forward and they get the chains moving down the field. But I think what you also want to look at is the macro perspective. Go back to that purpose. Go back to what you defined as the single governing purpose for the technology at the start of the process, and think, okay, when did I expect this to be achieved? This was a 5-year goal. This was a 10-year goal. And I'm happy with what we've done so far. Maybe not fully happy, maybe not where we exactly wanted to be at this point in time, but given it's a 5 or a 10 or a 15-year goal, I think that we can re-engineer some of the way in which we're working with this technology or people in the organization in order to achieve that. So that's everything. The 5 major challenges, I think at least, of adopting marketing technology, ad technology,